Good morning. Welcome to Madnair on Air. That was really weird, Calvin. What was that bumper music?
It was a song called Vote by Mud River. Yeah, I agree. It was a little odd.
Vote. Make sure you're a voter.
Yeah, vote,
Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to myvote.wi.gov, myvote.wi.gov. 33 days away from the election. Excited to be joined by Michael Wagner, is a professor with the School of Journalism and Mass Communication at UW-Madison. Good morning, Michael. How are you?
I'm great. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. So much discussion, Michael, about voting and whether or not voting is secure and whether or not it's easy to cheat. And we wanted to talk to someone for quite a while to kind of take us through from the birth of a ballot to putting it to bed. What happens with our elections? So let's just start with the ballots. Who prints them? Who is responsible for printing them? What's on them?
So, what's on the ballot are the candidates for office who have met the requirements to be candidates for office. And in the case of the general election, those who've gotten through the primary to be their party's winner to be on a ballot. Or if there's a referendum question, there's a process to go through the Elections Commission and the state legislature and to get on the ballot. And so the things that are on the ballot are the decisions we have to make about who it is we want to vote for and whether we support particular proposed changes to our state constitution, in particular for this election. And then, these the ballots vary, across the counties of the state of Wisconsin because, we might be voting for local races in Madison or Dane County, where I live, that people in Greene County and Brown County won't be voting on. So, of course, they don't see those candidates. So we only get the ones that are relevant to the people who would represent us where we live, from president on down to our local city and county officials. And we vote, either at a precinct or a ward, that is close to where we live in most cases. And then we also have opportunities to vote absentee, mailing in. There are some places allow you to use drop boxes as well to drop off your ballot. But there's lots of different ways to cast a ballot. But the way that they are treated is equal across those different mechanisms.
Are there any identifying marks on each ballot to number them, or so that they can keep track of these ballots and make sure that, we stopped at 400, say, and this is number 425, so we know that that's not accurate, that's not real?
That's right. One common claim people make when they make a baseless claim about voter fraud is that there's ballot box stuffing, that there are more votes cast. But this can't happen because the election officials in each ward keep track of how many people come and cast a ballot. So for when you vote in person on election day, what happens is you have to show your state issued ID. And then, which is usually a driver's license, but it doesn't have to be a driver's license. Then, of course, you already have to be registered to vote. In Wisconsin, you can register to vote on election day, and it's not too hard to do that. So if you haven't registered, it's not too late. You can just show up on election day and register to vote. But if you go to vote, you give your name to the people who were volunteering their time at the ward. They ask you your address. You tell it to them. They ask you to sign in. They write down the number of voter you are at that particular place at that particular time, and then they write that same number on your ballot, and then you cast that ballot and turn it in. And so they keep track of exactly how many ballots they don't. And I should say, when they write down the number, they don't write it down next to your name. They write down the number in another location so that your ballot is still a secret ballot.
Right.
So it's not that they can go back and look up who Mike Wagner voted for later. They just know that Mike Wagner was voter 504. They keep track. There were at least 504 voters, and then you turn in your ballot. And so as you say, a ward comes back with 620 votes for a candidate, and there are only 600 ballots cast, they know that that's not possible, and then make sure to not count ballots above the number that maxed out where the voters were in that particular precinct. And then the same thing happens with absentee ballots, which we can talk about if you'd like.
Absolutely, because that came up recently, where and I'm sorry, the lawmaker's name escapes me right now, but he's like, well, why isn't the barcode on the ballot?
That was Tom
Well,
Tiffany.
oh, was it Tom? We were just talking
Tom
about Tom.
Tiffany.
It's not on the ballot because, as you said, Mike, they don't want to be able to say this is who Jane voted for. That's
Right.
why they don't do that.
That's right. We have a private ballot in the United States, and who we vote for is our business and our business only. And if we want to share it with other people, we can. But the government doesn't get to know who it was that we voted for. And so what happens with absentee ballots is they get processed on election day. And so many people have argued that it would be nice to be able to process these ballots early to not overwhelm folks doing the counting. But in Wisconsin, they have to be processed on election day. And so the election inspectors first verify that the envelope meets all the requirements that are present for an absentee ballot to be counted. So there's like a presence of a voter's signature, there's a witness signature, and even an address for the witness. And if all those things are met, then the inspectors open the ballot and begin to tabulate it. And then they do the same thing to that ballot, that they make sure that they mark a voter number in the poll book so that they know, okay, this is another legitimate ballot, and it increases the number of ballots cast in our ward, right? And then that process is not just one where the inspectors are engaging in it. It's a process that can be observed by members of the public, and usually members of both political parties send observers to this process to watch the counting of these votes happen. And so it's very easy to try and cheat. It's very difficult to actually cheat in the casting and counting of votes in Wisconsin.
Well, it would take, at least in my estimation, it's going to take a whole bunch of coordinated people in a very coordinated manner to pull anything off like this on a scale that is going to actually affect the outcome of an election. And it's going to take a bunch of people in a bunch of different places to be able to pull this off.
And what's interesting is when some folks who like to make arguments that our elections are not secure, and again, these are all unsubstantiated arguments, they're evidence-free arguments, but when they make them, sometimes some of the more extreme groups will actually try and engage in a bit of voter fraud to show the vulnerabilities in the system. And the reason we know that is that they get caught, which means that the system is working. It's stopping these people from voting. And so it's almost ridiculous sometimes to note how people who are trying to show the system is vulnerable actually reveal the security of the system when they try to do that.
Professor, I really enjoyed the phrase evidence-free argument. I'm going to use that. It's evidence-free. A question I have for you is, maybe I've heard people go back and forth. So if, let's say I have my home, I have my family, and I have my wife, as well as maybe 2 kids who can vote, and we all fill out absentee ballots, we each individually have to drop off our ballots, or can I take all 4 of them and just say, I'm going to drop them off at the drop box and be done?
I'm not exactly sure about that rule, so I don't want to say anything that isn't true.
Of course.
I know everybody is safe dropping off their own ballot at a drop box.
Yeah.
And I know that it's against the law for people to ask you what you're doing at the drop box or to harass you in any kind of way at a drop box. Sometimes people will stand near a drop box and try to make you feel like you can't drop this off unless you also do that. Those things aren't true.
Yeah.
But so long as often absentee ballots are mailed in, right? And so anybody can put them in a mailbox and mail them, so long as the ballot is filled out, the envelope has your signature and the witness's signature, your address and the witness's address. If it has all of those components, it can be mailed in. I don't actually know whether you can bring other people's ballots.
Well, we're going to be talking to Deb Cronmiller from the League of Women Voters, and we can clarify that with her. If you're just joining us, folks, Professor Michael Wagner is our guest. He is with the School of Journalism and Mass Communications at UW-Madison, and we're just talking about voting in Wisconsin. He's also the distinguished chair for the Wisconsin Idea, just talking about ballots and what is the process and how does this work. And I think it's important to reiterate, Professor, again, there's a number on the ballot. So every ward knows if 600 people voted and those 600 ballots came back. If 650 ballots come back, they're going to say, we didn't issue 650 ballots.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And each ballot is numbered. And so if a ballot has a number that's higher, then they know, that wasn't one of the ones that they.
Well, and the other thing too is if I'm going to attempt this, say there's 600 ballots cast, and I'm just going to screw around with the 550 to 600 number, and I want to replace those ballots. I'm trying to think like a criminal. Work with me. So I'm going to try and replace those ballots so I can drop them in a drop box. But now they're
you're not the one numbering them as the voter, right? It's the people that do the counting. That's the people that are administering the elections. You're not writing it. Yeah, that would make it a lot easier to cheat. So you show up, you show your ID, you sign in when you're voting in person. They give you a slip of paper with your voter number on it. You walk that slip of paper over to another person who writes that number on a ballot, and then you go vote. And so there's not a way to do that unless you infiltrated a county election administration office, got access to a bunch of ballots, also stopped all the humans who voted with those numbers from putting their vote in the voting machine.
Exactly.
It seems like it would be extremely hard to do that.
That's the point, though. That's the perfect point, is that what you are describing is such a huge, coordinated, calculated effort, but yet we still have individuals who will say, yeah, those are fake ballots. And then it's on us to say, but you don't get how hard it is to do that and how secure, because the conversation we're having right now, on top of all the other conversations we have with other people regarding this matter, and then on top of the fact that courts, lawyers over the past few years have said, nope, our own assembly speaker has said free, fair, safe election, but yet it's still people who say like, there's shenanigans happening. And you can't convince them otherwise.
Well, and that's why we wanted to talk to you, Professor Wagner, because again, I think it's important for folks to appreciate how complicated and the massive coordination it would require, and numerous bad actors all over the place in order to do this, much less have it actually affect the outcome of an election.
You would also probably need to have both the Republican and Democratic Party observers who are watching the counting both be Confederates for your side. So you'd have to have a double agent in one of the parties so that they don't say anything when they see the shenanigans happening. And so it's very difficult to imagine in Wisconsin how this could happen on any kind of systematic scale.
This sounds like the script to a terrible movie versus like what could happen in reality.
Hollywood would look at this and go, this is impossible. No one's going to buy this.
Yeah.
We're going to continue our conversation with Professor Mike Wagner from University of Wisconsin-Madison. We are talking about ballots from birth to putting it to bed. Stay close. You are listening to Matt Nair on air, coming to you across the Civic Media Radio Network. Good morning. Welcome back to Matt Nair on air. Jane Matt Nair, Greg Bach, and the Calvinator on the board, coming to you from our studio in downtown Waukesha. You can always join us. You can call, you can text. The number is the same, 855-752-4842. That's 855-75-CIVIC, or leave a comment if you're watching on the live stream on Facebook, YouTube, and what used to be Twitter. We are talking to Professor Michael Wagner. He's a professor from the School of Journalism and Mass Comm at UW-Madison, and also a distinguished chair of the Wisconsin Idea. And we're talking about voting in Wisconsin and ballots, essentially from birth to putting it to bed, the entire process when we cast our votes, and essentially how enormously complicated and difficult it would be to cheat successfully. So, Michael, let's talk a little bit more about absentee ballots. I remember very well in 2020 when Donald Trump, I'm way ahead. Well, not all the ballots are in yet, and certainly not all the ballots have been counted yet. And that's why counts can change as the night goes on, correct?
That's right. I think one thing to keep in mind when you're watching voting returns is it's not like watching a Packers game where, you watch the returns and, oh, Trump is ahead. Now Harris is ahead. All the votes are in. there is already a winner. We just don't know who it is because we have to count the ballots. It's not like someone is ahead and then lost their lead. Like all the votes
Right.
are cast. There is a winner. We just have to count. And in Wisconsin, the rule is you cannot count absentee ballots until Election Day. And so in Milwaukee County and Dane County, where lots of people live and lots of people cast absentee ballots, it takes a long time to count them because, as we were saying before the break, you've got to have the inspectors say, okay, this envelope is legitimate, then the ballot is legitimate, then we can count it in front of the observers and move on. So that happens with each ballot. So it's opening thousands of ballots on Election Day. And so in the really populous counties of Wisconsin, they're not done doing that until the middle of the night. And we saw this happen in the Evers Scott Walker gubernatorial race. We saw it happen again in the next one. We saw it happen in the most recent presidential race, where you might go to bed and one candidate currently has more votes that have been counted, but then you wake up and another candidate has more votes when all the votes have been counted. And this is a prime way that people claim fraud. Well, it was the middle of the night and under the cover of darkness, this horrible thing happened to our ballots, when in fact it's required by law that the counting happens in that way, and it happens every time. And it doesn't happen every time because people are cheating. It happens every time because that's when you're allowed to count the ballots. And so it always is going to be slower, especially in the more populated counties where there are more absentee ballots sent in. And so we should expect that and recognize that is also happening with witnesses watching on election night and the following morning.
And we have the opportunity to rectify that, and our lawmakers elected not to. Is that correct?
Correct.
So we could have started counting the ballots sooner and gotten away from this, the middle of the night ballot times, blah, blah, blah. And they elected not to do that. One wonders, only because I'm a suspicious human being, that there are some who like that. Yes, they're in the middle of the night and then dumping ballots in order to perpetuate this fraud, that there is massive fraud.
Is it on, Professor, is it on Election Day, or is it once the polls close, they start counting ballots?
I think they have to wait until the end.
And see, that's what I thought. And I thought that they were trying to make it so that they at least could start counting
the day of,
during the day.
Because then you could count most of the ballots in the morning and be set.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that was, we voted on that. The people, we did. So,
yeah, well, there's that. Mike from Green Bay texting and listening on WGBW. This ballot thing sounds like an impossible mission. Maybe Tom Cruise could pull it off. I don't even think Tom Cruise dropping down on a rope into a ballot box would be able to pull off massive fraud.
But I'd pay to see it.
It'd be a fun movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, Professor Wagner, I guess you have a deep expertise in this. I have to imagine watching the news and especially like, I think it was Georgia. It was a southern state decided that they wanted to hand count all of their ballots this year.
Yeah, Georgia. Mm-hmm.
Georgia. This, I mean, for you as a professor, as an expert in this field, it just has to drive you kind of bonkers to say, like, it's safe. We got a good process. Let's not mess with it right now.
Well, and even in where they did do hand counts, there were more mistakes made when they did hand counts before.
That's right. Hand counting tends to make mistakes a bit more likely than other methods of counting. So they're literally choosing to make it harder to have an accurate count.
Our elections are safe and secure in Wisconsin. Free, fair, and safe elections. Take that with you to the mailbox.
Take it to the ballot box,
or the polling place, or trust the process.
Yes.
It works. And as you pointed out too, Professor Wagner, and I thought that you made such a good point. Those who were trying to prove that you can cheat in the elections proved that you can't cheat because they got caught.
Yeah, that's always a fascinating thing where people who are trying to show vulnerabilities in the system find that the system has a set of safeguards that are designed to catch people. I mean, in most analyses done of fraud attempts in Wisconsin, it's about 0.003% of ballots that should not have been cast. And that's usually because a person has a
Made a
felony
mistake.
and hasn't waited out until the end of that term. That's the most common way that these things happen. Other times people show up at the wrong place by accident, but then they
Michael
get told that
Wagner.
when they try to sign in.
Michael Wagner with the University of Madison. Thank you so very, very much. This has been fascinating. Thank you for your time. News is next. Stay here. Matt Nair on air on the Civic Media Radio Network.